Welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is finance. Finance. Yes, finance. How does finance sound? Is that a word that you hear very often, or is that a word you don't really hear very much? You probably hear a lot more about money. Money's probably something you hear about every day, but finance isn't one that you get very much exposure to. So I'm going to help you with that a little bit today. So, what is finance? Well, before we say what it is, I just want to stress how important it is. Finance is essential for managing your money, right? Why? Well, your money can either work for you or against you. And that may seem kind of strange because when you think of your money, you think of having possession of it. And when you have possession of it, you think that you get to use it however you like to use it, right? But if you have bills to pay, usually your money's going to be placed there first, right? And after all the bills get paid, then you start thinking about the stuff that you actually want, right? Then, you buy that, you start enjoying yourself, and then hopefully there's something left over. But if there's not, then you got to wait until the next more money starts rolling in, or your source of income, whether that be a job or whatever it is, brings you actually more money. So having to take that process, if you have a lot of bills, you can start seeing how if you don't have a lot of income, that everything is starting to go towards bills. There's a little bit less for your discretionary income, or you actually being able to spend money on the things that you want. And then when it comes for your savings or your rainy day fund, you might not have enough there, or that might be something that you overlook. And so in that case, money's not really going to be working for you, because when you get tough times hit you, then all of a sudden, you're looking for that extra money that is nowhere to be found, right? So that's how money can work against you. But it can work for you if you make different decisions, such as if you actually decide to pay yourself first. So instead of worrying about paying the bills first, every time you actually have a source of income that's actually giving you some type of money, the first place you put it is your savings or your reserves or money for the rainy day. Then you worry about paying your bills. And then whatever's left over could be your discretionary income. So that's all based on your process and how you actually think. So I told you why finance is important, but what is it exactly? Why didn't people not really mention it very much? Well, everyone's got probably a slightly different definition. Some might be bored by the definition. I actually love the topic of finance because it always means I can learn something more about money. So anytime someone has something to say about finance, lend it an ear. You might learn something that helps your bottom line. So finance is the study of value and how it works. So just like the laws of energy, the laws of value work the same way. Value may not necessarily be something that you have to see or touch, but you have an understanding that it exists and that it's there. And just like energy, value, it can be created, it can be destroyed, and it can be transferred. Now it's interesting because your parents probably told you that money doesn't grow on trees, right? So if money doesn't grow on trees, then that would sound like it can't be created, but money actually can be created. The government creates it every day. When they print money, they're creating it, right? Now, we're going to talk about money in a second, but just understand about finance. It's not really the study of money so much as it is the study of value. So you hear about finance, it's a study of value, how it's created, how it's destroyed, how it's transferred, and maybe sort of going along with all of that, how it's actually managed, right? Now, moving on to money. What is money? Well, money is the exchange of value. So we just talked about finance being a study of value. Money is an exchange of value. So this is when value actually gets transferred. So we actually have money instead of what we used to have in a bartering system where you would essentially trade goods and services straight off the bat. So if you had a sheep and let's say I had a pail of water and you really needed the water and you're willing to trade me the sheep for it, we actually have an exchange of value. You get what you want, I get what I want. But this day and age, let's say you don't actually want my water, but you wanted, let's say, an ox, and you were willing to trade 5 sheep for an ox. Well, I didn't have an ox, but what I have might be worth as much as an ox. So we actually use money as a way to exchange value instead of what we actually physically have. so that we can use money as a way to get what we actually need or want. So that's how money actually works. Now, getting to the bottom line, well, if we go a rung deeper or a level deeper, what is value then? Well, value is supply and demand. So, what is supply? What is demand? Well, supply is whatever amount of something that you actually have. And the demand essentially is other people actually wanting it. So let's say I had gold, right? Well, there's not a lot of gold in this world. So as a result, the price for gold can be very expensive, right? And the reason it's expensive is because there's not very much of it. But let's say that I have something that there's plenty of supply of. Like, let's say I have grass, right? Oh, I have sod. You can plant sod and grow grass in whatever yard that you have. Okay, well, grass is everywhere. So it's not going to be as much as gold. But as long as there's a market for it, as long as people need it, I can supply that. But again, it's not going to be worth as much as gold. So that's really the difference between supply and demand. The demand is just really how bad someone wants it. How much are they willing to pay or trade for it? Now, the more common something is, the lower the value and the lower the demand. So I just talked about grass. Let's say grass being plentiful. You're not, let's say, in a desert where grass can't grow and have some special type of grass that you can grow in the desert. But let's just say normal everyday grass, I can, dig it up and I can offer that. All right. So that's not going to have a very high value. It's going to have a low value and a low demand because there's so much supply. But when we talked about gold is rare. So since it's rare, the demand for it's much higher, and as a result, the value for it is much higher. Now, we talked about finance, we talked about money, we talked about value. So, with all this considered, where do you find value? Well, you can find value everywhere. But if you're looking for something that's valuable, that's in demand, that's very rare, believe it or not, you have to look in places that most people don't look. And you need to have an eye to essentially identify value and understand it in a way that most people don't understand it. So, where do most people not look? Well, you have to think, what do most people not do? Well, in this day and age, we live in a world of instant gratification. And people want things very quickly, and they're not really willing to wait. So patience isn't something that a lot of people have. But for the folks that do have patience, they can actually use that to find the things that most folks don't find because they're impatient. So someone who's patient might actually choose to read a book. Now, when's the last time you read a book, right? I work to read, let's say 25 to 30 books a year. That's my goal. Sometimes I'm even a little bit busy to do that, but I also outsource some of my reading to my son, believe it or not, who helps read some of the books and give me some of the cliff notes so I can take that information, take that material, and actually incorporate it with what I teach. So you can find a lot of valuable information in books. You can find perspectives of different people. You can find just ways people do things that are different than maybe your immediate network does or the people that you know. And so any place where you can find information that comes from someone else's perspective, that can be incredibly valuable. All right. Also, another place that's really valuable, a lot of people don't look, is themselves. If you know what your strengths are, that gives you a huge advantage, right? That gives you ability to demonstrate value or maybe even find value. But the better you understand yourself, you might find a very valuable asset that you didn't realize you had. And that's not going to escape from you. You know just who that person is. Okay, next one. Doing what most people don't do. So after, let's say you graduate high school, after you graduate college, are you continuing to learn? Or are you just coasting by, just doing everything that you know day in and day out? Well, if you choose to learn one new thing every day, that can build some incredible momentum. And that can create some incredible value in form of personal development. So that's a way to create value, again, within yourself. Making decisions that most people don't make. So do you know that for finance, most people outsource or they give the job of managing their finances to someone else? And unfortunately, in this country, the people that manage the money, that might be managing your money, they don't have to have your best interest in mind, which is really weird and kind of messed up. So if you manage your own money and you make your own decisions with it, you're going to have your best interest in mind. But if you do give it to someone else, they're not required to have your best interest in mind. So if anything, they most likely will make more money off of your money than you do, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So being able to make your own financial decisions is something I'm a big proponent of. That's a part of financial literacy, and that's something that I want to make sure that you understand and that you pursue so that you can make your own financial decisions. And probably the common question that I get is, why don't they teach finance in school? I remember going through school. I went through all the way through high school, went to college, and I didn't learn very much about finance. Which, again, is something else that's messed up, because as soon as you go to college, you have to get a loan, which you actually have to know what that is in order to get it, or maybe it's just signing on the dotted line. And then when you get a job, there's a lot of other things you have to worry about in regards to finance, because then all of a sudden you have to start paying bills. So why don't they teach that stuff? Well, because the educational system is broken, all right? The system was not designed to teach you finance. And there's a very particular reason for that. The teachers that are teaching you in school weren't taught finance. So how can they teach you something that they didn't learn themselves? So that's the first thing, right? And then after that, you got to look at what school really is. School is designed to teach you to be reliant on a financial system as an employee, okay? So as an employee, you're almost being trained to have someone else manage your money. You're trained to do a specific series of tasks, and you're trained to, let's say, work in a job or capacity for your entire career until you retire. That's how the system works, right? But what I'm teaching you is something different than the system. It's probably something that you're not very familiar with. But there's a lot to it. And if you haven't had a chance yet, I encourage you to learn more. Now, the whole idea of an employee is something that I dive down into, and you'll probably hear me talk about it as an MVP. Why? Because most people love sports, right? If you follow any type of sport, let's say you have your favorite athlete or your favorite player, you probably know a lot about them, their statistics, and they're probably very good at what they do. But they're playing a game, right? And in the game, they may be one of the best players that exists, but they're still playing a game based on rules that they've mastered. And the whole idea with finance is finance has its own rules, and it, believe it or not, can look just like a game like an MVP would actually play. But the biggest thing is, if you don't know the rules, you can never be an MVP, right? So you have to know the rules. So that's why I'm talking about finance. That's why I presented this topic for you today. Hopefully we hit on a few pieces of information that are useful or new for you, and hopefully you decide to continue to follow along as we talk about some other lessons that are tied and associated with finance. So if you haven't had a chance yet, visit escapethemonopoly.com and take the test. It's a very short 7-question test. It will let you know if you're an MVP or something different. And it'll also explain a little bit more of how an MVP or most valuable player actually thinks, what they do, and what the other roles within a capitalist market actually are. So I hope you enjoyed this talk, hope you enjoyed this discussion, and look forward to following you on the next lesson or hearing from you from the next lesson. If you have any feedback, let me know. All right, bye.